Hello everyone, welcome back down the fly. Today we're recapping day 2 of the Men's World Championship happening in Herning, Denmark and Stockholm, Sweden. So we'll hop into it today, of course, with the scores from today's game, starting with our friends in Group A, where we'll see a 4-0 victory for Canada over Slovenia. Now, this was a game that I would kind of say was an interesting one, and not just in the sense that, yes, it was a 4-0 victory for Canada, in where if you look at my predictions, I had them winning 8-0. But this game was one that I think kind of showed both sides. And I think it sort of showed the power that Slovenia is going to have at this tournament. And it's going to be one that you're going to see is going to be a commitment to defensive structure. And a credit to them, they did a very good job of limiting Canadian chances today. However, there were quite a few of them. But their goaltender, once again, stood on their head. And I think it just kind of goes to show that teams like Slovenia, teams like, your Austrias, we'll talk about them in just a second, teams have the ability to compete at this tournament. And I think it just kind of says, it sort of speaks to the competitiveness and that parity, skill parity is starting to get on par once again. But I don't think it's necessarily a knock on Slovenia. I just think it's one of those games that, yes, 4-0's your final. Canada, I think, very well could have won by more. But at the same time, Slovenia had a lot of high-quality chances, especially early in the hockey game. And they score one of those goals, all of a sudden, this game could be very different. So as much as, yes, it was a 4-0 victory for Canada today, lots of positives to draw from both teams. And I think overall, it's a good start to this tournament for both these teams, despite, you're looking at this game saying Canada should have won by more and Slovenia is looking at it like they lost. I think there's definitely quite a few positives to draw from this game. And then we'll move to the second game of the day between Sweden and Austria. And okay, let's talk about this one, because this was a wild one. And I can't really do it justice talking about this game, but the Blues notes on this one is that, Austria goes up late in the third, 2-1, and then all of a sudden Sweden decides, hey, now might be a good time to start playing some hockey, scores 2 goals, and I think it's 11 or 15 or something like that seconds, knocking on the door. All of a sudden now they're leading, they pot the empty net. This one ends 4-2. Austria holds the lead and is leading with 5 minutes left in the third against the powerhouse at this tournament. Austria, a team that I didn't have in my making the playoffs in my prediction video, although I did have this game pretty close. And if you go rewatch yesterday's day recap video, I was warning you that this game was going to be a lot closer than some people might think. This was a game that I think for Sweden was one that you want to look at, and, you think back to yesterday, Sweden won the game, but it wasn't one of those games that was one that, yeah, we're proud of that game. I think it was more of a game that you're kind of, yeah, we were pretty with the puck. We scored some goals where it counts, but they didn't carry that into today's game, and you could really see that. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with this game for Sweden, was that they just got too pretty with the puck. And especially early in this one, you could argue Austria was the better team. And, you look at the first couple periods, very even. And for Sweden, it's not necessarily the fact that it's a 1-1 hockey game. It's the way you're playing. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from this game, is that Sweden, I think, needed this game as a wake-up, that they're not the know-all, end-all at this tournament. I think they needed that little push that they can be beaten, and I think this is going to be that exact thing. And we'll see, whether or not Sweden's able to bounce back from this one, and I would expect them to bounce back stronger. But in the same respect, you don't know. And I think this game for the Swedes was a real wake-up call, and for Austria, this was their awakening. And I think, you look at their game yesterday, and it was one that they should have been very proud of. They drew a lot of positives from it, despite, not having the result they were hoping for. So I just think that when you look at the way that they're playing, especially Austria at this tournament, they're finding ways to be competitive. And I think that's a big plus, especially, you have a tough 2 loss. You take 2 tough losses early in this tournament, but you're right there with the best teams. And I think that's something you can definitely draw positives from as you go and play, some of the other teams that you're going to be fighting for that quarterfinal spot with. So when you look at this tournament for Austria so far, I think it's one that they've been drawing a lot of positives from and building a lot of momentum, and it wouldn't surprise me to see that carry on through the rest of the tournament. We'll now move to the third game of the day between France and Latvia, and we'll see Latvia here, a 4-1 victory. But this was another game where we saw Latvia really struggle to find the back of the net, and that's always been one of the problems for Latvia at some of these tournaments is it came down to, yes, they're going to play a real good defensive game. Today wasn't great. I will say France found those openings. But for Latvia, they played a very good game, I thought, today. And I was thinking, as they were going down in the first period or first or second, whatever period it was that they got scored in, they went down early. I was thinking to myself, if they end up losing this game, and obviously we're going to talk about this game, is this a game for Latvia that is one that I'll say they didn't play well? And I found a very difficult time saying that because I thought they had some good chances. Yes, they allowed some chances the other way, but that's one of the problems when you're playing against a weaker team is that, especially as a team that prides itself on its defense and plays a very defensive structure, is that as soon as you have to be the aggressor team, you start to have some gaps open, which is just part of the problem with, playing as a better team. So I just think for Latvia today, it's about sticking with it. And as much as, this isn't the result, yes, you look at the final score, great. But as much as this isn't the game you were hoping to play, you get kind of 2 goals late towards, or you go to goal in the second, early in the third. I just struggle with that for Latvia to say that's why they won this game, because they played well, and I'm not going to say they didn't. I thought France looked good today. They definitely found their looks that they needed to, just got outclassed by a better team. But for France, I thought France played well enough. But for Latvia, I just, it does concern me a little bit just with the lack of goal scoring, with the quality of chances they had, that they weren't finding the back of the net. So that's what I got here for Latvia, a 4-1 victory. Can never complain about 3 points. We'll now move to the news for Group A with Canada, who is seeing green. As much as, yes, it's a 4-0 victory, would have liked to see more. Still a positive win and lots to draw from in that one. As for Slovenia, some good looks today. We'll see if they can continue that as they do play Slovakia, which we'll talk about in just a little bit tomorrow. Will be a good game and a good test for them there. As for Sweden, they are lucky. Very lucky today to be escaping with 3 points and not 0. Yes, you can look at the final score and say, hey, they still won by 2 goals. But those who watch that game know that Sweden is lucky to get away with the 3 points at that. As for Austria, defying odds, I think that was definitely a storyline of today for them. It was one of those games for Austria that I thought was coming. And as much as I think in the prediction video, I can't remember what I had. It might have been 4, 5, 6-1, somewhere in there. For this game, if you watch the recap video yesterday, it started, for me at least, you see them play against a tough Finnish team, and alarm bells are going off. And one of the biggest things for me that I was watching was, it's not a guarantee that Sweden's going to win this one, especially when we watched the way Sweden played against the Slovaks. They didn't play great. And I think that definitely showed today for the Swedes. It carried over. But Austria looked good against the Finns, and they played very good defensive hockey, exactly as they needed to. They just unfortunately lost that game. And I think when you put them against the Swedes, who are a little bit more reckless in the offensive end of looking for the perfect play, you saw Austria kind of pick that apart. So for Austria today, yes, they do lose 4-2, but this game should have, in my eyes at least, definitely had a shot to go Austria's way. If not, obviously they ended up winning it. So for Latvia, then to Latvia we go with trusting it. Trusting the system is something that can be tough at these kind of tournaments, especially when you're down. but they did show that they are willing to go with it. So for Latvia today, trusting it. As for France, they did put a scare into Latvia today. And who knows, maybe that's the push they need to really do some stuff, to do some things at this tournament. I don't expect France to be all that mighty and powerful at this tournament, but in the same respect, they showed today that they're good enough to generate some chances, and you never know. You get a couple bounce here or there, all of a sudden this game could be very different. So that's going to do it for our Group A. We'll now move to Group B. We'll start with, I think, the upset of the day in Group B, where we'll have Kazakhstan beating Norway 2-1. And this was a game that, this was a weird one. And not in the sense that Norway didn't play well. And this one kind of ties a little bit with the Latvia game, where, you're thinking in this one, is it really that Norway didn't play well enough to win? And I don't really think it is. And I just think, it's a couple lucky bounces for Kazakhstan in this one that ended up making them the winners. And not to mention, I don't want to take away from the Kazakh goaltending, because that was exceptional today. That was, in my eyes, the reason why they won this game. But it wasn't necessarily that Norway played bad. And I think they just kind of got a little bit unlucky today that they got goalied. And for Norway, as much as you hate to lose the first game of the tournament against a team that I had predicted to be relegated, it's a tough way to start. And we'll talk about it in the news, of course, but to start a tournament down against, you're playing against, in my eyes, one of the weakest teams at the tournament, it's a tough way to go down. So for Kazakhstan today, a huge win. And I thought if they played their style of game exactly as they needed to. They generated chances off the rush, which is what you're going to see a lot of from this Kazakh team. And I think when you look ahead to what they're going to be needing, it's going to be, it's going to need to be that opportunistic style. And you'll look to see them play that way against Hungary, which it is still going to probably determine that relegation spot. If Hungary can find a way to win in regulation against them, all of a sudden that this game is meaningless. And it kind of, if we're talking about old tournaments, it kind of reminds you of that Finland one a while back, where the team won for how many years against the Finns, and then they ended up getting relegated. It's just the story of the tournament, and that's the joy of international hockey, because it comes down to the one that matters. You can win the game against Norway, but if for Kazakhstan, if you go out and you lose, if you end up losing to Hungary, all of a sudden it doesn't matter anymore. So a big 3 points today for Kazakhstan. Not to take away from that. Now it kind of gives them a little bit more wiggle room to, if you can squeeze out a point in overtime, all of a sudden that dynamic shifts everything. So Kazakhstan today, the big win, big upset in Group B. We'll now move to the second game of the day, which was a little bit less of an upset. Germany 6, Hungary 1. I don't know what else I can say about this game. Germany took it to Hungary, and better team won today. So that kind of consolidates that. Hungary didn't impress me too much. I would have expected a little bit of a better effort, but it is a tough German team where they have offense upon offense. They're always a tough team to play against. Hungary today, unfortunately, couldn't keep the puck out of the net. 6-1 is your final. Now move to the third game of the day, where today has been a weird day of hockey. And you look at the final scores, and I could have told you what the final scores was minus the Kazakhstan game. But it's been weird, because the way Denmark played today wasn't necessarily deserving of a lead halfway through the second. Not to say that they didn't play well, but they scored on every chance they had. And for Switzerland, just kind of struggled to keep the puck out of their net and on those chances. And Switzerland played a heck of a game today, and the final score, I think, better reflects that. But you go down 2-1 against Denmark, and the alarm bells are ringing, right? They're ringing. And for Denmark, you're now riding the crowd, and you have the crowd in your back corner where you can feel that momentum on home ice, and then you kind of let the lead slip away a little bit, and then all of a sudden Switzerland's back in the game, and they're scoring a goal, and they're scoring another goal, and this game for Denmark today, I think, just kind of shows that they can compete at this tournament, and they've had that glimpse of we can compete. Now it's just a matter of going out there and doing it. So a 5-2 victory for Switzerland over Denmark today, a real good win for the Swiss, and one that, although the game might have been close at one point, I think the final result is more indicative of the way Switzerland played today. Not saying that they played amazing, that they even allowed Denmark to in this one, but they played well enough to win, I thought. So that'll do it for the scores. To Group B news we go with, for Norway, a rough start to the tournament. Never want to start a tournament with a loss, much less to one of the worst teams in your group. Now it's about, all of a sudden, they're now going to be the team that's going to be talked about in the relegation game, where if you look ahead, they're going to have to go through a very, very tough team in Hungary, where, yes, they might have lost badly today, but, they're a defensive team. Time will tell on that one. Should be interesting. So that's what we have for Norway. Then to Kazakhstan with the early upset. We sort of already talked about it, but this is a big win for the Kazakhs. We'll see whether or not they're going to be a team that's going to be competitive for the rest of this tournament. I still am going to stick by my prediction that they will likely lose most of the games in this tournament. Today didn't change my mind that much with it. I thought they rode the hot goaltender well. I can't remember the amount of saves, probably 40 plus saves if I had to guess, especially the late push by Norway. But for Kazakhstan today, they pull off the big upset and a big 3 points in the standings, especially for the relegation hopes. Something to keep an eye on there. Then to Germany we go with, they are here to play. They're a team at this tournament that I had a couple question marks about, especially with their goal scoring. That was answered for me today, and I think they'll be just fine. As for Hungary, I think it's going to come down to the response for them, and we'll talk about who they'll be playing tomorrow, but you're going to play the U.S., and they're another tough team that's going to score a lot of goals on you if you don't fight back. I think this is going to be a game that you're going to see Hungary hopefully find their way. If not, it might be an early exit for them at this tournament. We talked about the game that matters, yes, but if you're not going to find ways to try and scrounge up points, it's going to be a tough tournament. So that's what we have for Hungary. As for Denmark today, with the crowd surfing, if you're playing at home in a double IHF event, you need to be riding with your crowd, surfing, if you will. They need to find ways to ride it out with their crowd. Right now, they're having some problems, and it's not necessarily the fact that they can't string together goals, because we saw that today, right? The first one went in, the second one went in shortly after. But it's more about whether or not you can find the goals and then you can hold the goals, and it's about keeping your crowd involved, because if you can continue that momentum, the crowd is a byproduct of the momentum that you're generating on the ice for your own team. If you start to let the Swiss back in, or if you start to let other teams back in, whoever it might be, whether it be Norway, Kazakhstan, Hungary, Germany, whoever it might be, you start to let teams back in, you start to lose leads and you start to lose momentum. And momentum is a ball that you don't want rolling down while you're trying to push the ball up the hill. You want to be riding with it down the hill. So for Denmark today, crowd surfing, they need to find ways to be with their crowd, keep them involved for the entire 60 minutes, because that's how they're going to win hockey games. As for Switzerland with Wakey Wakey, a little bit of a scare for the Swiss today, but I do think the end result is more reflective of how they played. So that'll do it for our news. We'll now flip to the standings. So in Group A, we will see Sweden in first place with 6 points. Then you'll see Finland, Canada, and Latvia all in second place, tied with 3 points. Then you'll see Slovenia, France, and Slovakia tied for second last, or you can say fifth, sixth, or seventh, and then Austria in last place with 2 regulation losses. As for Group B, it's a little bit more funky with all, of course, the overtime wins with Switzerland and Czechia from yesterday. So for Switzerland, they will be in first place with 4 points. USA, Kazakhstan, Germany will be tied for second with 3 points. Czechs will be in 5th place with 2 points. Then you'll see Norway and Hungary tied for 6th and 7th with 1 regulation loss, and Denmark in 8th place with 2 regulation losses each. A reminder, at this tournament, both bottom teams are will play in a relegation game. Both teams in the bottom 2 spots are relegated from this tournament, so lots to play for to try and stay out of that. But now we'll talk about tomorrow's games. At least we'll start here with Group A on May 11th between Slovenia and Slovakia. And this is a game that I think is going to be an awakening. And I think you'll see the Slovenian team have and play a game that they have a shot in. I think if they play the way they did against Canada today, they have a decent shot to beat the Slovaks. I do also expect the Slovaks to come out a little bit hot. Obviously a tough game against Sweden. But I think you're going to see a very invigorated Slovakian team, and I would predict Slovakia to take this game. It wouldn't surprise me to see this game get out of hand for the Slovaks, but of course don't want to get too ahead of myself because predictions haven't exactly been my friends so far at this tournament. Then to the second game we go between Canada and Latvia, and I think this will be a game that is going to be an interesting one, and not necessarily in the fact that it might be a tight game, but I think it's going to be interesting in the fact that this game could be close, and I think you'll see pretty early on whether Canada's able to break through the Latvian defense. And if they are, great. You'll probably see Canada run away with it. But if you start to see Latvia hang around like Austria did today against Sweden, don't be surprised to see Latvia come out on top. We saw it at the juniors. Do not make the same mistakes again. You know, you have a much better talent pool in Canada at this tournament. We'll see if they're able to use it. Then the third game of the day we go between France and Latvia. France and Finland rather, not Latvia, because Latvia plays against Canada, but France and Finland. And this, in my eyes, will be a game that should be well fought. I expect Finland to take this game, but honestly, France, if they can play the way they did today, they can definitely make it interesting against the Finns, especially the way that they've been playing at this tournament. I haven't been impressed by them, but they should still win this game. I'm not saying Finland's going to get upset by France. I don't expect that to happen, but I do expect France to definitely make a push at some point in this game, whether it's early or late. I think if it's early, you'll see the upset alert. I think you'll see them make a late push as well, but it's just a matter of how quickly France can take that momentum away from, or if how quickly Finland can take that momentum away from France. Will decide this game. Then to Group B, we will go starting with the first game between the USA and Hungary. I don't want to talk too much about this one because I expect the US to dominate much of play. Not expecting too much out of Hungary today. We'll see tomorrow rather, we'll see what kind of game they play. Then the second game of the day we go between Germany and Kazakhstan, and I think this game could be interesting, but I do expect Germany to dominate much of play and really stifle the Kazakh offensive push that we saw today against Norway, where we sort of saw them sort of fight back at times. I don't expect that to be very similar to their style against Germany. I think Germany is a much better team both ways of the ice. Time will tell, of course, but that's what I'm expecting for that one. And the third game of the day between Norway and Czechia, and I think this game should be dominated by Czechia. Obviously, Norway is a team that just got upset by Kazakhstan. We'll see whether or not they're able to fight their way back. That should be an interesting one as well. If I had to pick a game of the day, it might be the Germany-Kazakhstan game in Group B. As for Group A, Slovenia-Slovakia would be my game of the day in that one. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you like, consider subscribing, tell all your friends, and comment down below your thoughts on Day 2 of the Men's World Championship. Until next time, see you.